So before I get started, I wanted to kind of tee up a few points that I think are very important for producers to tell as we tell our story. The first one is, to keep up with the world population growth, we need to produce the same amount of food in the next 50 years as we have produced in the last 10,000 years combined. Second point there. Today, the average U.S. farmer feeds 155 people, and in 1960, a farmer fed just 26. And then today's farmer, you want to talk about sustainability? Here's a sustainability tagline right here. Today's farmer produces 262% more food with 2% fewer inputs compared to 1950. So our world population, it depends on who you talk to. Some estimate it's going to be 10 billion by 2050. In 1950, the U.S. population was 160 million, with about a third living on the farm. Today, it's 317 million, with less than 2% on the farm. Today, 86% of our population lives in suburbia. So my question is, are they going to move back to the country and have 1 cow, 5 chickens, and 3 hogs? And I think the answer to that is no. So, pork sustainability, this was some of the original work that we had done to define sustainability within the pork industry. Safeguarding the environment comes naturally to America's pork producers because we understand our inherent responsibility to future generations. What are we really doing with sustainability today? And we're addressing a changing marketplace. Today's customers are far more familiar they're far more removed from production agriculture. If you ask a child most of the time in school today, where does your food come from? They're going to say from the supermarket, not from the farm. Customers through Facebook, through social media, are far more understanding or have more knowledge of right or wrong knowledge of production agriculture today. Increasing media coverage, and then the ag industry and America's pork producers need to maintain and enhance customers, our relationships with them, and we need to make sure we have their trust. So what are the benefits to producers from a sustainability standpoint? You know, I've had questions about, well, who's going to pay for this? Well, there's really no cost to being sustainable. The idea is to become more efficient, therefore to reduce our input cost and to have new revenue from that. This is a quote from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. And as you can see, their expectation is not for overall emissions to reduce, not for total emissions to reduce, but for improvements to come from becoming more efficient, so that if you change the denominator with efficiency, the amount of emissions per unit of production decreases. So that's really what they're after, is not necessarily a reduce in overall total emissions, but on a per unit of volume. A couple years ago, the National Pork Board conducted a 50-year comparison to production. And if you look at between 1959 and 2009, the number of hogs we increased was increased by 29%, with a decrease in the breeding herd by 39%. Carcass weight improved by 2x per sow per year, and then feed efficiency improved by 33% on a carcass basis. Water was reduced by 41% per pound of carcass weight, and then total land use was reduced by 59%. Carbon footprint was reduced by 35% in that 50-year study. So what are we doing with all this? And this is really our end goal, and that is trying to take public trust to the next level. Trying to get those customers to realize that we have been doing the right thing for a very long time. And that's what that 50-year study tells us. We have been improving over time. Sustainability isn't something new to the pork industry. In 2009, the Pork Board, through the Environmental Committee, started a program that we termed the 4 Pillars of Environmental Sustainability. Started with carbon footprint, then went to water footprint, air footprint, and then land footprint will be the last one that we do this year. And we'll be completely done with those 4 pillars of sustainability this year, and then we'll have some more information next year. From a carbon footprint standpoint, we learned that there's about 2.5 pounds of CO2 equivalent per 4-ounce serving from field to fork. It's important to realize this isn't the entire chain it's not just the farm gate, but this is literally from field to fork. And here are some of the things that we looked at from the input side: crop production, farm use, transportation, processing and packaging, retail contributions, refrigeration, for instance, consumer consumption, and that's in consumer consumption, there's things like natural gas usage to cook it, and then disposal of unused pork and packaging. The unused pork is waste, and then packaging in the material. Here is here on the left bar graph here is the total from farm to fork carbon footprint results. As you can see, 62% or nearly a third come from the live animal production, and I'll get into that in a second. 5.6% processing, 7.5% in retail, 23.5% is the consumer's burden, and then the 1.3% in packaging. So if we split out live animal production, or what producers have to look at, I'm going to start at the top. Fuel electricity is just 3%. Manure emissions is 40%. Feed is 42%. So where we can get better there is in feed efficiency. And then also looking at our upstream users, whether it be the fertilizer industry or corn growers or row crop farms, how can they become more efficient on their side that feeds in to the pork industry. And this piglets number is a little bit confusing. It's 15%, but that 15% carries on through the finishing side and takes the sow and the boar burden, if you will, with the pigs. Water footprint, 8.2 gallons per 4-ounce serving. Very same things from an input standpoint that we looked at from a carbon standpoint as well. Excuse me. I apologize for this. We just looked at this in the tent, and those category names and values were correct, and now they're not. So as you can see, from a water standpoint, 84% of the water footprint comes from rations, comes from feed. So everything basically that we receive from ingredient standpoint, we're taking into the industry. And then 13% is on the farm. Alan, you're going to have to help me remember some of those things that were in there. Consumption's in there, packaging is in there, transportation is in there. But they're all very, very small. But as you can see, the vast majority comes from feed from a water footprint standpoint. If we look at just the farm gate, so what's raised on the farm, what water is used on the farm, including feed, we jump up to about 90% of that total being in the feed, and then about 10% on the farm. And that's broken out to 9% from drinking, about 0.5% from washing, another 0.5% from cooling, and then some other in there at 0.3%. Another further breakdown of on the farm that we just talked about. So tying back, we're done with water. Air is, we're expected to have some work at the end of the month on the first draft of that work, and then land is currently being done by the University of Arkansas to be finished up as well. Here's something I'd like for producers to be aware of if you're not. There is currently available today a toolkit available for producers to understand what their water footprint and carbon footprint is on the farm. This is a CD that goes in your computer. It does not send any information to anyone. It is stored on your hard drive. But you could calculate your on-farm carbon footprint, and you can calculate your on-farm water footprint. We'll also show you where some opportunities are to improve on some of that. And then from a carbon standpoint, it will also give you some economic information about, okay, if I go to direct drive fans, what does that cost me to do? And what's the potential energy savings to do that? If you want a copy of this, I don't have any with me, but please come see Alan and I. And we want to get a copy of this in your hands because we would really like to get this rolled out to producers. So everything I led up to there was talking about environmental sustainability. And sustainability is just not about the environment. As you can see, if we really look around the outside of this graph here, we've got environmental goes into sustainability, swine health, welfare, animal science, public health, pork quality and safety. All of those things go into sustainability. So the pork board has put together a work group to begin defining what sustainability is for the pork industry. There was 28 invitees to this particular work group. These partners included folks from, I think it's actually on the next slide. So we had individuals from McDonald's, we had Kroger, we had production companies, we had individual producers, and other retail and food service partners come together and say, all right, let's work on one, defining sustainability, and then two, let's start with developing a metric to measure sustainability. So here's the tagline that we came up with on the definition of sustainability: showing how we care, doing more to benefit people, pigs, and the environment. And this is kind of a bigger version or narrative version. Healthy pigs produce healthy pork for consumers. Our We Care principles provide standards and training programs that help responsible farmers succeed by doing the right thing for people, pigs, and the environment. We invite you to join us in our commitment to the following values: protecting public health through a commitment to farm and food safety, protecting and promoting animal well-being and farmer-led standards and training programs, safeguarding natural resources in all of our practices through our 4 pillars of environmental sustainability, improving the work environment and best practices through continuous research and education, and contributing to a better quality of life in our communities. One thing I want to stop here is I was on this work group, and we used a marketing firm to test a couple versions of this. One thing that I learned is no matter how good I think it sounds or how good it looks on paper, what I think really doesn't matter. It's what the consumer thinks it says. So as we looked at some of this stuff, there was just individual words that as we tested them, as we moved them around, it meant something different as we moved those words around. So it was really an interesting learning experience. And at the end of the day, it's our consumers that really matter because they're going to be what's driving our industry. So some of the steps that we're going to go through, we've got to define key performance indicators. For instance, one might be improving feed efficiency over time and developing what that percentage goal is. Developing critical impact metrics for each KPI, so how basically a sub-goal of each KPI. And then over time we have to benchmark. We can't just set a goal out there for 20 years and not benchmark along the way. Develop and adopt goals for improvement across each metric. So looking along the way, how are we doing? Do we need to adjust anywhere? Implement improvement strategies. Measure each metric using best scientific methods at prescribed frequency. Report the results. Be transparent is the most important thing from a sustainability standpoint for consumers and the public. And then adjust and adapt practices as necessary. KPIs, if you've ever heard of a SMART goal, that's what we're after, our SMART goals. They've got to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Science-based, very important. Outcome-based and only practice-based if measurement of outcomes is impractical. Metrics are non-prescriptive and flexible towards practices. cost implications and saving opportunities are considered, address regional issues, regulation. Metrics have to be useful to producers and processors and our stakeholders and the public. Recommendations are simple and easy to understand. Producers and processors can benchmark. We can actually measure them. It's one important thing. There's others around that's doing different KPIs that they're so difficult to measure that they don't do any good, and then continual improvements are encouraged.